$94,000. That's your net worth at 34. Not your salary, not your bonus. Everything you own minus everything you owe. And the total appears on a Sunday night at a kitchen table, next to a coffee that went lukewarm an hour ago. You have a good job, a decent apartment, a 401k growing at the speed of continental drift. You've made every responsible move on the board. And yet, there's a ceiling in your life. Not a glass one, those at least let you see what's beyond them. A solid one. You feel it every time you sit in a conference room and watch someone 15 years older make a decision you already know is headed in the wrong direction. In the specific way you already know it will unfold. And you say nothing. And you take notes. And 6 months later, the thing goes wrong in the specific way. You are 34 years old, and you are about to stop taking notes. The call comes on a Tuesday, not from a giant, 60 employees, Series B, a board that just lost its founder and needs someone to scale the thing without letting it unravel. They want you, not somebody with 2 decades and silver hair. You. The offer letter arrives in your inbox at 11:17 p.m. Base salary, $280,000. Bonus target, 40%. And equity. A meaningful amount of equity. You read the equity section 4 times and understand maybe half of it. You sign anyway. For the first time, your next step is driven more by possibility than by certainty. You are 35. You are now a CEO. Nobody hands you a manual because there has never been one. In 1963, a shy 46-year-old woman named Katharine Graham was suddenly handed control of the Washington Post after her husband's death. She had never run anything. She later wrote that she walked into that building carrying her inadequacy like heavy baggage, certain everyone could see it. 8 years later, she made the call to publish the Pentagon Papers with the company's existence on the line. And by the end of her run, she was widely recognized as one of the great publishers of the century. The gap between how she felt on day one and how she performed on day one, that gap is the job. It has always been the job. You learn this before your first lunch. Day 1. 17 people need answers from you before 9 a.m. You haven't had coffee. You don't know where the coffee machine is. Someone is crying in the second-floor bathroom. A vendor is threatening to pull a contract. And the board wants a noon call about Q3 projections you have never reviewed. So you smile. You take notes, different kind of notes now, notes that lead to decisions. You walk into that noon call and project a confidence that does not yet fully exist. And nobody can tell, because the title changed everything except the problems. The calm you project is what keeps the boat moving while you learn the water. Your net worth is still $94,000. The equity hasn't vested. The salary won't arrive until the 15th. You are rich on paper and uncertain in practice, with 60 people who believe you know more than you do. You let them assume it, not out of dishonesty, out of necessity. A leader's steadiness is part of the structure everyone else depends on. Something fundamental has shifted underneath you, and it takes a few weeks to put into words. You have stopped being a person who carries out other people's decisions and become the person who lives with the consequences of your own. There is no one above you to be quietly right about anymore. You begin to realize that leadership isn't about having every answer. It's about being willing to own the outcome when the answers are incomplete. Month 3. You let someone go. Not a bad person, a good one, just the wrong one for where the company needs to go next. You've never done this. You sit alone in the room for 11 minutes before they arrive. The conversation itself takes 6. They cry. You don't. Not because you don't feel it, but because the whole floor is watching through the glass, and your face is a company-wide signal. That night, you drive home and sit in the parking garage for 20 minutes with the engine off. Nobody sees that part. Nobody is ever supposed to. Then something even stranger starts happening. The truth begins keeping its distance from you. Information stops flowing uphill the moment you become the hill. Your team starts telling you what they think you want to hear. Not all of them, not always, but enough that you can feel a gap opening between what's happening and what's being reported. So you develop a new kind of awareness. The half-second hesitation before a number. The eyes that find the table instead of you. You start asking questions you already know the answers to, simply to measure how people answer them. It works. It's also exhausting in a way no spreadsheet could ever measure. 6 months in, revenue crosses an annualized $8 million. The board sends congratulations. Just one sentence. You forward it to the team, and they celebrate, and it's genuine and warm, and you stand at the edge of it with a plastic cup of sparkling water. Then everyone goes home, and you open the laptop and start modeling what Q4 must look like to keep the momentum alive. The celebration lasts an afternoon. The next problem starts the same night. That ratio never really changes. At the 1-year mark, the first equity tranche vests. At current valuation, roughly $340,000 on paper. You can't sell any of it because of the lockup period. You stare at the number in the equity portal and feel something that isn't joy. It's closer to validation. Proof that this is real, that the risk wasn't irrational. You are 36. Your net worth crosses $400,000 for the first time in your life, and you tell no one. Because there is no one in your orbit who would understand what the number means without misreading you along with it. That's the part they don't put in the offer letter. The loneliness. Not the loneliness of empty rooms, the loneliness of crowded ones. Of being in every meeting and having nobody to speak to without reservation. A 2024 survey found 55% of CEOs reported experiencing mental health issues in the prior year. And reading that, you don't feel ill, exactly. You feel like you're broadcasting on a frequency nobody else can quite receive. You eat lunch at your desk most days. Not from busyness, because eating with the team creates dynamics you then have to manage, and some days, you just need 30 minutes of quiet. Success keeps opening bigger doors, but it also asks you to carry responsibilities that few people ever see. Money changes shape at this altitude too. Below $1 million in net worth, every question about security. Above it, the questions begin to shift. The account balance stops being the goal and becomes the scoreboard. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "What is this costing me in time?" And those two questions, it turns out, lead to entirely different lives. At 37, the company crosses $20 million in revenue, and the board starts saying, Series C, the way other people say, vacation. You spend 4 months fundraising, 41 investor meetings, 22 rejections, some courteous, a few brutally direct. In one glass conference room, in front of 6 of his colleagues, an investor tells you your growth is impressive, but your unit economics need work, and he isn't sure you're the right person to lead this to the next level. He says it while casually scrolling his phone. You nod. You thank him for his time. You ride the elevator down 40 floors and then carry his sentence around for 3 weeks. Not because he was right, but because he could have been partially right. And the job now includes examining your own confidence to find out which part deserves attention. The Series C closes. $45 million at a $180 million valuation. Your stake is suddenly worth $9 million on paper. Still locked, still theoretical, but real enough to change the way you see the future. Because this is when you finally understand something fundamental that nobody says out loud in business school. The salary is just the salary. The wealth lives somewhere else entirely. You stop thinking about paychecks and start thinking about the exit, not because you want to leave, but because you can finally recognize the structure of the thing you're standing in. Your paper net worth crosses $10 million at 38. Here's what changes. Nothing. You still wake at 5:47, 3 minutes before the alarm, every day, like your body is filing daily complaint. You still check the company's metrics before you check the weather. You still carry 60, then 90, then 120 paychecks on your judgment. The number in the portal doesn't lift that weight. It simply changes the reason you are carrying it for. Because success never made the job easier. It made it heavier and faster at the same time. Every milestone unlocks a harder puzzle. More revenue means more operational risk. More people means more organizational strain. More investors means more competing definitions of winning. You'd imagined becoming CEO would feel like arriving somewhere. It feels like being handed a bigger, faster vehicle with less room for error on a road that keeps adding lanes. The higher you climb, the less the challenge becomes proving yourself, and the more it becomes protecting what everyone else is building around you. Year 4. Something breaks. Not catastrophically, but enough. A key hire from 18 months ago, someone you trusted and paid well, leaves on a Friday and takes 2 of your best engineers out the door with him. You spend the weekend rebuilding the org chart in your head, on napkins, in the shower. By Monday, there's a plan. Tuesday, you present it to the board. They're rattled. You are not. Or rather, you are, but you've learned by now that a leader's emotional state is felt throughout the organization faster than any memo. If you panic, the room panics. If you stay level, the room borrows that stability. This is the loneliest mechanism in the whole machine. You absorb the fear, so no one else has to metabolize it. And here, in the hard quarter, is where the company actually gets built. Anyone can run a business when everything works. The culture formed concrete in the bad weeks, in the layoff, in the pivot, in the moment the answer isn't clear, and 100 faces turn toward yours to see what you do with the uncertainty. You are 40. The company, 340 people, $67 million in revenue. A strategic acquirer makes an offer. Not the first, but the first truly credible one. $310 million. The board wants to negotiate. What follows is 11 weeks of due diligence. Lawyers, accountants, data rooms. 6 a.m. calls with people in time zones you have to quickly identify. You lose 8 pounds you didn't offer. You sleep in fragments. And then, on an unremarkable afternoon, it closes. Your stake, after dilution, after taxes, after everything, comes to $11.4 million. Liquid. In your account. Real. You are 40 years old with more money than you ever expected to see. and you find yourself sitting at the same kitchen table where this started. The one where you used to calculate your net worth on Sunday nights. The coffee goes cold again. You don't notice again. Some things, apparently, remain unchanged despite everything else. What the money does next is unexpected. It asks you a question. Not, what will you do with it? That part is easy, almost too predictable. The real question is, who are you without the pressure that built it? Because somewhere along the way, the identity stopped being the title and became the fight itself. And the fight, for the moment, is over. The acquirer wants you to stay 2 years. Integration role. A different kind of responsibility. You report to someone now. Someone younger than you were when this began. You do it anyway, and it is uncomfortable in a way that turns out to be surprisingly valuable. You learn things the view from the top had hidden. You are useful in a smaller, less visible way. You serve the full 2 years. You leave at 42. Net worth, $14 million. No office, no direct reports, no board calls. You have breakfast on a Tuesday, and there is nowhere on earth you are expected to be. For 3 weeks, this feels like a malfunction. Then, slowly, the feeling begins to fade. The silence you spent 5 years outrunning turns out to be just silence. It was never the enemy. The enemy was the version of you that could only measure your worth when other people needed something from you. Harry Truman kept a small sign on his desk in the Oval Office. The buck stops here. A gift, of all things, made in a federal reformatory. What nobody mentions about that sign is what happens when you finally leave the desk. The buck doesn't stop with you anymore. And for a while, you genuinely don't know where it belongs. Only then do you realize that letting go of responsibility can be just as challenging as learning to carry it. So you start advising founders. Not for the money. For the same reason you used to check the account on Sunday nights. Something in you is still looking beyond the ceiling. One evening, one of them, 33, Series A, dark circles, exceptionally bright, sits across a table from you with her laptop open and her coffee going cold beside it, and asks the only question that matters. How do you know when you're ready? You look at her cup. You recognize the moment immediately. You could tell her the truth, that you're never ready, that the ceiling she can feel above her isn't the company or the title, that it was never a ceiling at all, but a distance, the relentless distance between where you are and where you believe you're supposed to be, and that the distance doesn't close when you arrive, because the distance was never the obstacle. The distance was the driving force. Instead, you slide her coffee toward her before it goes fully cold, and you say the only thing that's both honest and useful. You don't. You answer the phone anyway.